Okay, so part 3 of this week's reading. We're on chapter that says Monday, August the 28th, and that's on page 33. Hopefully, we'll get all the books in school and you'll be able to follow along then. Today was the first day of school. I left the house at 7:30 to walk to the front of the development and catch the bus. The smoke was thick and strong smelling. I walked past dark green dumpsters filled with plasterboard and scrap metal, past blue portable toilets parked along the construction lots. It occurred to me that I've never lived in a development that was finished. I always have lived with overflowing construction dumpsters and portable toilets sitting on boards. I turned right at the end of Kensington Gardens Drive and walked parallel to the high grey wall. Something started to bother me almost immediately. The grey of the wall drifted along in the left side of my vision, distracting me, troubling me. What was it? Something about the wall, something about a bus stop, something I needed to remember. My steps slowed down and I came to a dead stop, frozen there like a wind-up toy that had just run out of talk. Then a scene came back to me, just like the other morning in Houston, entirely on its own. A scene came back to me. I remembered another bus stop and a shiny yellow school bus. I was standing at the back of the line of kids waiting to board the bus for one of my first days at kindergarten. Mum had driven me to school on the actual first day. This was the first day when I would be accompanied by no one except Eric, my 5th grade brother. But Eric did not accompany me for long. He was standing at the front of the school bus line with his 5th grade friends when one of them turned, made a gesture and called to me, "Hey, Eclipse boy, how many fingers am I holding up?" I didn't realise at first that the boy was talking to me, and I had no idea what he meant. Eric and his friends laughed about the joke, and then the bus doors opened and we all filed in. I can't put all the details in order now, but it became clear to me later that for some reason the big kids on the school bus were calling me Eclipse Boy. The fact is, we did have an eclipse that summer, around 3 weeks before school started. Based on that, Eric was telling his friends this story. The reason for the Coke bottle glasses on my eyes was that I had stared at the sun, unprotected, during that eclipse. The story puzzled me then and it puzzled me now. I do not remember doing any such thing. And yet, when I search through any family photos, I can see that I never wore glasses of any kind before that summer. But right after the eclipse, I was wearing these thick lenses that I call now my regular glasses. Puzzled or not, I went right along with the story. I even told it myself. It gave me a special kindergarten identity. It made me somebody. I was the boy who had not listened and who was now paying the price. Look at me if you dare. Teachers and other adults seemed to value me as an example. I was a living proof that you shouldn't look at an eclipse or you'll go blind, that you shouldn't play in an abandoned refrigerator or you'll suffocate, that you shouldn't go swimming right after you eat or you'll get stomach cramps and drown. So there I was on that yellow school bus, Eric Fisher's younger brother, Eclipse Boy, visually impaired and totally incapable of following in his brother's footsteps. The scene faded. I stood for another minute trying to remember more, but nothing would come. Then I made myself turn away from the wall and I made my legs move again, one step in front of the other to the end of the street. As I turned the corner, I was surprised to see other kids standing next to the guardhouse. In my 2 weeks here, I had never seen any other kid in Lake Windsor Downs, even though I'd ridden my bike up and down all of the streets at all times of the day. Now, here they were, spread out in a lazy line, about 10 kids of various sizes. I quietly took my place at the end of the line, next to a guy who was slouching so badly that I thought he might actually fall over. He wasn't alone either. Everyone seemed to be depressed by the sorry to be there. I wonder if that was just an act or if they really didn't feel any excitement about the first day of school. "What's up, goalie?" I turned and startled to find that someone was actually standing right behind me. I hadn't seen him coming. It was Joey Costello. I held up my hand and said, "It's Paul Fisher. You're Joey, right?" "Right," he answered, shaking my hand. "I met your brother over at my house. I met your father too." "Yeah, they said something about that. They said your brother can kick 50-yard field goals." "Right, yeah, he can." "Mike says Coach Warner wants him for holding the ball. His name's Eric, right?" "Yeah, I had a feeling Mike be holding the ball for Eric when he told us he was the backup quarterback." Joey thought for a moment and said, "Mike's getting a bad break, you know. Mike's a good player, but he's a lineman, not a quarterback. And now he's playing behind Antoine Thomas, the best quarterback in the state. He'll never get to play unless something bad happens to Antoine. And then everybody will be mad because Mike ain't no Antoine." "Yeah, he can't win." The bus turned into the entranceway and stopped in front of us. When we climbed on, Joey sat with one of the soccer players from the other day. I found an empty seat near the back and pulled out my class schedule. The school had sent us computerized schedules that showed my 6 periods, teachers' names and classroom numbers. With the schedule would come a map of the high school, middle school campus, which I appreciated, and a handwritten note to Mum from Mrs. Gates, which I did not. It said, vision impaired students should report to the office for assistance. That made me mad. What do you plan to do, assign me a dog and a cane? The bus turned into the campus and drove around to the circular driveway that said buses only. I looked again at my schedule, feeling jittery. It said homeroom 8:15 to 8:25, portable 9. I moved along with a big crowd of kids circling the main building and funneling into the wooden walkway that led to the portables. I found the one that said P9 with no problem whatsoever. There was a green sign on the door that said Miss Alvarez. I climbed the 3 wooden stairs and opened the door. Miss Alvarez gave a cheery good morning and told me to find an empty desk. The kids seemed to be made up of some kind of droopy kids that stood with me in the bus line. In contrast, Miss Alvarez had lots of enthusiasm. She told us she was truly excited to be here on the first day of a new year. She went on to tell us that we were her first homeroom ever and that she was looking forward to starting each day with us. We sat there and stared at her without much reaction, but she smiled bravely through it and we passed the first 10 minutes of the school year together. She asked us to take out our schedules and check them. Mine said, science 8:30 to 9:25, portable 12. Miss Alvarez read out some announcements from a computer printout, but there was nothing about the soccer team. The speaker in the room crackled to life with the sound of a gong being struck. This was our signal to funnel out again into the wooden walkways. We had 4 minutes to get to our next class, but it took me less than 1. I climbed up a set of stairs marked P12, where the green sign said Mrs. Hoffman. Mrs. Hoffman was standing right inside the door, scowling and holding a seating chart. She's clearly at the other end of her teaching food chain from Miss Alvarez, as she would soon tell us. She had been teaching science for 20 years. She asked my name and then directed me to the last seat in the first row. The kids in this room seemed a little more lively. Just 5 minutes into Miss Hoffman's class, there was a knock on the door. A girl came in holding a block of wood with the word pass painted on it. She whispered to Mrs. Hoffman, who checked her chart, looked towards me and said, Paul Fisher, go with this young lady, please. What could I do? I got up, I followed the girl out of the door and onto the walkway. I said, where are we going? Mr. Morrow's office. Who's Mr. Morrow? He's the head of guidance. We went to a small office inside the main office. A man with a brown suit and thick glasses like mine was sitting at the desk. He had a pile of those IEP forms spread out in front of him. He said, and what is your name? Paul Fisher, sir. He found my IEP form. All right, Paul, this is Kerry Gardner, one of our school volunteers. Kerry will act as your eyes, so to speak, until you've learned your way around the campus. I can see fine. He seemed genuinely surprised. You can? Yes, sir. I've been to 2 classes already. Mr. Morrow looked back at the IEP form and then at me. He said, well, perhaps since you're new to our school, Kerry could just take you around for the first day. What harm could that do? I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to describe the harm that would do to me. Nothing more came out of my mouth, so he said, why don't you two go back to Mrs. Hoffman's class? I followed Kerry Gardner back to P12, actually to the wooden steps outside of it. That was where I finally found my voice. I stopped still and I said calmly as I could, look, I'm sorry. I don't mean to mess up your job, but there's no reason for anyone to show me around, okay? She looked at me puzzled, so I explained, there's nothing wrong with me. This is a mistake. I can see fine. Kerry answered matter-of-factly. So then, what's this with the glasses? I reached up and fingered the thick plastic frames. I finally answered, I had an accident. I had some kind of damage to my eyes when I was 5 years old. Kerry clearly did not mind being released from her duties. She thought for a moment, lowered her voice and said, look, I'll hold on to the pass until the end of the day and then turn it in. Nobody'll know. Okay, thanks. Kerry started off, but turned back to ask, what was the accident? What damaged your eyes? I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure, I replied. She took off again, leaving me thinking, why didn't I answer that question? I used to have an answer ready to that question. I used to tell people that I had once stared too long at a solar eclipse. But if that's the truth, if that really happened, why can't I remember it? Okay, that's the end of that chapter. And now we have some questions. So let's sort that out and share the screen. Okay. Okay, Monday 28th, here we are. Here are the questions for this. So number one, in this chapter, it repeats the story of Eclipse Boy from the prologue. So at the beginning of this book, I read the part where he was standing in the bus queue and he was called Eclipse Boy, but it said it all again in this chapter. Why do you think that is? Number two, why is Paul so angry about getting help with his eyesight? Number three, why didn't Paul answer the question about his eyesight? So why didn't he answer what Kerry asked him? And number four, what do you think really happened to his eyes? Okay, pause the video, answer the questions, and then we'll go through them. Right, number one, in this chapter, it repeats the story of Eclipse Boy from the prologue. Why? Well, I think this is a very important bit of the story, and I think the author wants to remind us what happened in this bit, because in it, Paul says that before the summer, he didn't have glasses, and after the summer, he did, and that his parents told him that he looked at an eclipse and burnt his eyes, but he doesn't remember it at all. So this part of the story is quite important. I think that's why the author has said it again. Number two, why is Paul so angry about getting help with his eyesight? Well, it's almost as if Mum and Paul have two different opinions of what he can do and what he can't do. So Mum thinks he needs help and he needs, support, lots of support, whereas Paul thinks he can see absolutely perfectly fine and doesn't need any support whatsoever. And he seems to be managing, getting to his lessons and looking at all his schedules. So I think he's a bit confused why his mum's done that. And also, when you go and you have help, other people stare at you maybe. And so it's difficult for him. He gets embarrassed. So maybe that's why. Number three, why didn't Paul answer the question about his eyesight? Now, this is a tricky one, isn't it? Because what he'd been telling everybody before was about the eclipse and burning his eyes. And all of a sudden, he just said, oh, I don't know what happened to my eyes. And maybe that's because he keeps having these flashbacks about what's been happening to him. And he's starting to remember more than he did before. So probably that's why. He doesn't remember the eclipse, does he? And he doesn't realise that happened to him. And number four, what do you think really happened to his eyes? Well, I'm going to leave you to think about that, because there's obviously some mystery around it, because he can't remember. He can't remember it happening. So somebody knows what's happened. Why hasn't his mum and dad told him the proper story? If he can't remember about the eclipse and he doesn't think that happened, why has nobody told him what really happened to his eyes? So you have a think about that. Okay, so that's the end of Tangerine for this week. And we'll carry on with it next week. I'll put another lesson on for punctuation for you guys to do as well. So see you next week.